The shocking truth on the Aaron Rodgers saga has finally been revealed by Tom Pelissero, reinforcing what fans hoped the Vikings would do. And a draft day trade has our eyes on a prospect who would be perfect in Minnesota. We're going to be breaking down all that in this episode of Vikings Digest. But first, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Vikings updates as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. With that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is the Aaron Rodgers truth revealed. So on the Rich Eisen show, Tom Pelissero just kept it plain and simple as to the reason why the Vikings weren't going to continue going after Aaron Rodgers, saying this isn't just about 2025, it's about 2026, 2027, and beyond. Meaning that with this, Minnesota was faced with a question of, okay, do we want to try and win a Super Bowl this year and risk having the next 2 years of JJ McCarthy be set back 2 years as well because he was sitting for the first 2 years of his rookie contract, and then having to justify paying JJ McCarthy off of that and not having potentially the weapons that you have there now built to win around him for the time being. So if you bring in Rodgers, you're really just trying to sell out for a Super Bowl this season, much like the Rams did in 2021 before they went into a 1-year kind of setback. They got back to their winning ways a bit, but it took them a little bit to get back to that point when they had the team that they had in that Super Bowl run. Minnesota doesn't want to do that and go into a 1-year rental with Rodgers, then having to go back to square one. Then you only have 1 year or 2 more years with JJ McCarthy if you go and do that, and then you don't know how the kid's going to be. He would have had to learn behind Aaron Rodgers for a year, and that would have been very valuable, but you still want to see what this kid can do on the field because we've heard so much hype about him. We've been so excited to see what he'll do. Minnesota has done everything possible to make sure he has the right weapons around him, and now they made the ultimate decision of what Vikings fans were hoping they would do, of turning down Aaron Rodgers, for the main reason being what all of us were saying on this show and what you guys were saying in the comments, is because they want to invest in JJ McCarthy for the future, build around him, mold him into the franchise quarterback that they've desperately wanted in this franchise since the days of Dante Culpepper and Fran Tarkenton. Those have been the closest that we have had to having an all-time franchise quarterback. A lot of teams, they've had a long history of them. You look at the Cowboys, as much as I hate to say it, they've had a long list of quarterback success. The Steelers, they've had a long list. The Packers, they've had a long list. Minnesota, aside from Fran and aside from Culpepper, we haven't had that many just stud quarterbacks come through our doors. Brett Favre was a 1-year flash in the pan. Look how that legacy turned out. Then you have Teddy Bridgewater. We thought he was going to be the guy. Didn't turn out. Unfortunate injury. And that was the other thing that Pelissero touched on, was that if Minnesota hasn't completely shut the door on Rodgers, that's why they've gone out and looked at Tannehill. That's why they've gone out and looked at these other guys, because guys are getting picked up like crazy. But if August rolls around and Rodgers hasn't been claimed by a team, I could definitely see Minnesota still entertaining the idea, because Minnesota fans, we know what happened with Teddy Bridgewater. In August of that season, popped his ACL out of nowhere. We had to go and get Sam Bradford in a mad dash. We do not want a repeat of that. So if you can get Rodgers to have that as an insurance policy, a very expensive one at that, as much as I don't want to have all the drama of Aaron Rodgers, I would still be okay with them bringing it if, God forbid, that is the case, or JJ isn't ready by August, or something has a setback where, as much as I hate to say it, or as much as you guys won't want me to say it, I would rather go with Aaron Rodgers over Ryan Tannehill in a backup spot if we had to go with either one of those guys. But I know you guys are going to have a lot of opinions in the comments. Let us know what you guys think of all of this. As far as what Tom Pelissero was saying, as far as what he was saying, I think that absolutely is what was driving the Vikings for sure, because we talked about it all the time on the show, how if you bring in Rodgers, you have a 1-year rental, JJ gets set back, and you can't really build for the future. You can't really see what you're building your future towards because you don't see what you have in JJ McCarthy. If you haven't sit for another year, that's another year where you don't see what this kid has, so you don't know what his strengths and his weaknesses are, so you don't know how to build around him properly. What Minnesota did this season, looking at the weapons that they have on offense, they went out and showed him that they're investing in that. When you look at the players in bold, those are Pro Bowlers. Brian O'Neill, Ryan Kelly on the offensive line. Then you have Will Fries, a young stud. Christian Darrisaw, a young stud that we drafted, one of the top 3 in the league. TJ Hawkinson, a great tight end and Pro Bowler. Rondale Moore bringing in speed with Jalen Naylor. Justin Jefferson, CJ Ham, Aaron Jones, all Pro Bowlers, and JJ McCarthy has all of that at his disposal now. Yes, Aaron Rodgers, he was seeing all this and saying, hey, that would be amazing for me to play with. However, with Minnesota, they said, you know what? We got our guy. If we need you as a backup or around August and you haven't been claimed, maybe they kick the tire down the road a little bit then. But as of right now, the Minnesota Vikings are out on Aaron Rodgers. I know we already covered that a few days ago, but this now brings the truth to the matter of, yes, they passed on him because they wanted to invest in the future and not just invest in a one-season flash in the pan where they can go and try and get a Super Bowl and trade that in for a bunch of years of misery. They are in the business of winning multiple Lombardis and not just one. But let us know how you guys think down in the comments. How happy are you that we're finally just investing everything in JJ McCarthy and showing that, hey, you're our guy, but as well as the Aaron Rodgers stuff, do you guys like the idea that they're not entirely keeping the door closed on it, but they're just going to monitor it and see what happens if he doesn't get picked up? Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments. That's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is tracking draft day moves. So on NFL.com, Chad Reuter, who is one of their draft analysts, was saying that the Vikings could stay put and take a defensive back themselves, but they currently only have 4 selections in this draft, so adding 2 early day 3 picks might be worth the risk of moving down the board a little bit. And as far as who they could be eyeing, Buffalo currently holds 10 overall selections in the NFL draft, including 5 combined picks in rounds 4 and 5, making the Bills a strong trade partner. And in this hypothetical, they move up with Minnesota to select Florida State cornerback Azariah Thomas. You could argue that the boundary corner is Minnesota's top positional need. Absolutely, we need a little bit more depth there with a month to go before draft. Safety should also be high on the list with Harrison Smith entering his swan song and Cam Bynum now with the Colts. This is where the trade block could end up being a home run for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Vikings. The top safeties can slide on day 1 of the draft and pick at number 30 overall. Reuter predicts the Vikings could still land a superstar talent in South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari. Stepping in the lineup at strong safety, this athletic freak showed the quickness to play nickel while at South Carolina. And if you guys were watching the draft combine, you would also know that he had a very impressive combine. According to ESPN's research, the only safety at the combine since at least 2003 to have a sub 4.4 40-yard dash, jump at least 40 inches in the vertical, and jump at least 11 feet in the broad jump. He flashed elite playmaking ability in 2024 and with 88 total tackles, 4 interceptions, and a pair of pick sixes. There might not be a better defensive back on the board for defensive coordinator Brian Flores, whose safety group would look scary with Smith, Metellus, and Emenwari on the field together. I think this is a really cool opportunity here, and I really like the idea of the Vikings kind of going for this. I think this is someone who is very appealing. I know Malachi Starks, Jahdae Barron have kind of been getting all the hype as far as secondary goes, but with a guy like this, he's projected to be a really good starter within 2 years. There are some really high ceilings when looking at his scouting report as well. Looking at the overview, the assessment of his tape could depend on which games you watch. He's a physical specimen with rare size and outstanding speed. He doesn't always play with the first to the action mentality and run support when he gets cranked up. He becomes a bit more effective tackler and overall run stopper from sideline to sideline. He's capable of playing over the top, inside the box, or even matching up with pass catching tight ends. He's upright with average transition, fluidity, and coverage, and has a great recovery speed and uses his length to throw a blanket over the catch point. He has the rare traits in NFL talent, and so a boost in urgency could take him from a good starter to a Pro Bowl caliber player. And as far as an NFL comparison, he had him there as compared with Jeremy Chin. I think that's a pretty good comparison. I think this is somebody that Minnesota could definitely benefit from with all the intangibles he's had. With South Carolina, had a fantastic season there. And then coming into the combine where he was one of the most impressive safeties. I think with Minnesota, you need to not only plan for this season, but also for when Harrison Smith, it's probably looking like his last season. So if you go out and you get the guy who is of the future, who can play with Josh Metellus down the stretch there and have that reliable 1-2 knockout punch instead of having a 1 and a 1.5 or a 0.5, or having an inexperienced rookie brought in again, you can bring in this kid, have him develop for a year, learning behind Harrison Smith, behind Josh Metellus in this Brian Flores system, getting playing time when he can, and still being a reliable Swiss Army knife that you can rotate in and out that teams will get thrown off balance with. I really like that idea because by the time that Harrison Smith leaves, he'll already be ready to take over the reins and fill in that spot. So I think there's a lot of upside with this guy, but there is some strengths and some weaknesses, and we'll dive into him here, saying he has elite bended traits, speed and versatility, has a skill set to match up with the top tight ends. Underestimating his range and space comes at a price. His wingspan and ball skills like a 5-star wide receiver. I love that with this defense creating turnovers. He's able to land punishing blows on catch targets. Leaping in length to help smother catch tries. And he has the speed to wipe out angles on wide runs and racked up solo tackles in all 3 seasons. His weaknesses, however, he drifts through games without urgency at times, inconsistent downhill trigger and run support, block, take on, and pursuit angles need improvement, gives too much ground to blockers instead of bypassing. Hip tightness limits transition quickness in space, average instincts, and route anticipation. So obviously, he's not going to be perfect. There's still going to be things that he has to work on. However, I think within this Brian Flores system, I think of all the defensive coordinators out there and all the teams that have a chance at getting this guy, Brian Flores would be the perfect coordinator for his development because he's one of the best coordinators in the league, and he's with one of the most dangerous defenses now in the NFL. When you look at the defenses around the league right now, Minnesota, there's not a lot of spots that you can look where they're not going to be scary. Our defensive tackles, they're dogs. Our linebackers, they're intimidating. Our secondary is looking like it's getting better and better by the day with each report that we see, with each signing that we've seen, and how these rumblings are heading into the draft. But what do you guys think of all of this and how he would fit on this defense, which again, another Pro Bowl loaded defense that you could add a rookie into this who could really excel, learn a lot behind Byron Murphy, behind Josh Metellus, behind Harrison Smith, Andrew Van Ginkel, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Grenard, Jonathan Allen, Harrison Phillips, Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace. There's so many players for him to learn from, and that would be a great influence for his development and go towards making sure that he could be a safety of the future for this franchise and fill in the legacy that Harrison Smith will unfortunately leave behind. But hey, if we have him and Josh Metellus, we got a really solid secondary and safety core there. So what do you guys think of all of this? Do you think this is worth the Vikings trading away their number 24 pick to move back in the draft and get someone that could be a really sneaky perfect fit for this defense? Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments below. It's going to be a very interesting ride to the draft. We're going to be bringing you guys as many updates as we can. So hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss the updates when they drop. But with that, I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.